Blog Talk Radio.
Happy Friday to all our listeners out there in the basketball world. You are listening to NBA Unplugged. I am your host, Jacob Noble from theprobasketballtalk.com. Alongside of me is my co-host, Brian Geltzeiler from thehoopscritic.com. You can follow him on Twitter at hoopscritic. Fantastic Twitter account to follow. And we're bringing you a special edition of NBA Unplugged this week. We decided to do two shows as we wind down the regular season. We're coming into playoff time, and we need some insight from the West Coast, so we decided to bring on Darius Soriano from Forum Blue and Gold today to talk a little Lakers, talk a little Clippers, and kind of break down the Western Conference with Brian and I. So it's going to be a very, very exciting show that we're going to have today. How are we doing today, Brian?
Doing good, Jacob. I just heard you talking about our show. I'm very excited to delve into Lakerland. You know, something about the Lakers that always gets me excited in a TMZ kind of way, you know. So Darius is the master of everything Lakers and tweets Laker games as they go on, probably better than anybody. And we're going to get him on in a few minutes and pick his brain on what's going on with the Lakers, the Clips, and where that all kind of relates into the Western Conference.
Yeah, I mean, you and I always talk about, you know, the Lakers team and how we just cannot write them off, no matter how poorly they might have played in the beginning, or, you know, trying to click with a new coach, or, you know, Andrew Bynum's getting his zen on, whatever the issues that arise are. They're a contender, and as long as they have Kobe, as long as they have a couple of solid big men in there, they got the point guard that they needed for this playoff run, and I think everyone in Lakerland's excited for the Lakers' playoff run, and it's going to be very exciting to see where it goes from there and how well they do and if they can live up to the expectations that are currently growing.
Well, it's interesting how this particular team has evolved as the season's gone on. Because, yeah, the Sessions trade's a little bit of a game changer for them because it gives them the screen and roll point guard they need to have an aspect of offense that doesn't have to run through Kobe Bryant, which is a big key for them. The other thing is interesting, and I want to discuss this with Darius also. Matt Barnes is all of a sudden, the last month or so, playing fantastic basketball. And when you look at that and you got Ron Artest playing better at the same time, all of a sudden this is a pretty deep team on the wings. You go 8 deep, and you're going to have a good rotation in the playoffs. Bynum has certainly raised his game to a level where, you know, he's probably the second best center in the NBA. And so you look at what they have talent-wise, and the fact that they do have a championship pedigree there, they're as dangerous as anybody in the West.
Absolutely, and I got to correct you on a statement you just made. I think Andrew Bynum is the best center in the league right now, especially with Dwight Howard not going to be playing in the postseason. So, you know, they can make a case that they have the best active center playing right now, and that's something to say, you know, putting alongside of a 5-time champion as Kobe Bryant. But the one thing that I want to break Darius's, you know, get into his mind about is Ron Artest, because a lot of people are, you know, thinking that without Kobe there, you know, Ron is allowing him to play the style of game that he's used to, because he's taken a backseat role with Kobe there, and he knows he's there for defense, and whatever offense they give him is a plus. So without Kobe, a little bit of a scoring burden has been placed on Artest, and he's rose to the occasion. So, you know, kudos to him.
Yeah, he's played great. You know, the thing about Ron is you know, first half of the season he showed up out of shape. He shot as bad as he's ever shot the basketball for the first half of the season. But, you know, the law of averages always catches up, and he's really come around and played real well in the second half, got himself into some condition. He's not the athlete he once was. The years have weared on him a little bit, but he is still one tough hombre on a defensive end. And as time's gone on, he's really actually fit this Laker team quite well. What I think is very interesting about our test here is I actually think he's one of the few guys who's a better fit with the Mike Brown Lakers than he was with the Phil Jackson Lakers. And that's something I want to ask Darius about today.
Yeah, I just my 2 cents on that, on why I think that is because I think Mike Brown's more of a defensive guy, Phil's more of an offensive guy, and, Mike Brown's offensive systems aren't very complex, and they rely more on, getting stops for offense, and we saw that in the Cleveland days, and they were a very tough defensive team, even though they really didn't have the best personnel out there. But Mike Brown is a coach who I think gets he gets either underrated or overrated, and I don't think anyone really assesses him fairly, due to the stars that he's had and the situations he's been in. But, he's learned the ropes through some fantastic head coaches such as Greg Popovich, and he's taken what he's learned and he's made himself a very serviceable head coach.
I think maybe he's more than serviceable, Jacob. I think he's a good head coach. If his team can run offense without him mucking up the works too much, and he's got some talented offensive players, very few guys coach defense better than Mike Brown. And this Laker team is a uniquely good defensive Laker team. And granted, part of that's personnel, but a whole heck of a lot of that, there we go, third time's a charm. A whole heck of a lot of that is scheme, and he's done a fantastic job.
Yeah, and one thing that's kind of looking at, because we're also going to talk to Darius a little bit about the Clippers. We know he's a Laker guy, but, you have two teams in your city. How can you not follow both, especially when one was so bad for so long, and now they're finally good. They're both going to be in the playoffs. This is an exciting time for basketball in L.A., so it's interesting to see that the Lakers and Clippers are both fighting for that 3 and 4 spot, and we'll talk to him to see if it matters for either team what spot they land in. I mean, obviously nobody wants to play Memphis, and that's a little icing on the cake for the Clippers is sneak in that 3 spot and avoid a tough first-round series.
Absolutely. Jacob, without going any further, why don't we cut to a break for a minute, and when we come back, we'll have Darius Soriano on with us.
Absolutely. We'll be right back, folks.
Stepping up. And we never give up. It's all about never giving in. And we never give up. It's about who wants the most. Stepping up. This is what it's all about. 2 great teams who are stepping up, and we know that you guys are ready to go. It's about who wants the most. That's what great players do. Big plays. Stepping up. And we never give up. It's all about having the heart of the champion.
In order to decide who really should have graced the cover of NBA 07 The Life Volume 2, I'm challenging Kobe to a one-on-one. Come see the Mongoose take on the Mamba. No way the Mamba's dropping 81 on me. I want you, Mamba! Mono y mano! Whatever number you're wearing, Kobe, I got it. I'm all over you, Brian! You know what? You can run, but you definitely can't hide!
Rivalries. That's live in the NBA. NBA 07 The Life Volume 2. Rated E for everyone.
I'll walk it off.
And that was a quick couple commercials for you. We'll be with you in 2 seconds with Darius, unless he's on the line already. Brian?
We got Darius Soriano from ForumBlueandGold.com on the line with us right now. Darius, you got Brian Geltzeiler and Jacob Noble with you. How are you today?
Good. How about you guys?
We're doing great, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Thanks for joining us. Jacob, you want to lead off, my man?
Yeah, absolutely. And let's get the big question out the way, which Kobe's coming back from injury, and I don't know if it's the easy, quick question, but I kind of want to take your thoughts on how the team is going to have to play getting used to having him back. And Brian and I touched on this a couple days ago when we had our other show. We were talking about teams are going to have to get used to playing with their stars again. The Bulls are going to have to do it with Derrick Rose, and obviously the Lakers have been playing fantastic without Kobe. They're going to have to adjust to having Kobe back. What kind of adjustments do you see the Lakers needing to make with Kobe back in the lineup that will allow the other guys, Matt Barnes and Ron Artest, to continue to be producing at such a high level?
Well, I think that's a two-way street, right? I mean, Kobe's coming back, and I think that obviously, as you guys implied, the guys around him are going to have to make some adjustments. They're going to be looking to him because he's a leader on the floor, and he's a guy that they typically depend on for production. But I think that one of the main things that they can do is actually not adjust, that they should continue to play the type of game that they've been playing with Kobe gone. I think that when you have a ball-dominant player like Kobe and someone who's as talented as Kobe, I think that it's easy to kind of give him the ball and let him do his thing. He's Kobe Bryant. We've all been watching him for a decade and a half. But, I mean, one of the things that the guys have been doing with Kobe gone is looking for their own shot and being aggressive and moving the ball around and not necessarily deferring to any one player. And I think that they need to continue to do that even with Kobe in the lineup and him potentially calling for the ball or him signaling, like, let's run this action. So they should integrate him and Kobe an aggressive player. So, I mean, he's going to look for his own, too. So I just don't think that guys need to acquiesce and just say, oh, well, Kobe's back. Let's shift our games back to what they were before, and let's lean on Kobe again, because I think that if the Lakers are going to go as deep as they need to, they're going to need that production from these other players.
Darius, I think you make a great point, because I've felt like with this particular Laker group, the Bynum-Gasol Lakers, so to speak, they're at their best offensively playing inside out. You have such wonderful passing big men that to get the ball inside and let these guys do their thing and kick out is really the most efficient offense for the Lakers and gets them the best shot selection. In that vein, so much this year has been talked about with Andrew Bynum, and there's an immaturity factor that everybody wants to play up. And my personal opinion is I kind of feel like all the other stuff with him taking a three and the benchings and a couple ejections, all that is kind of glossed over and clouded what is a player that has become probably the second best big man in the league and just a tremendous two-way center, offense and defense. And I just think that he's become a fantastic player. Talk a little bit about some of the maturity and emotional issues Bynum may have had, but more than that, the player that he's become, and if you think one has something or nothing to do with the other.
Well, I mean, first of all, I think that one of the reasons why these things become important within the construct of media and reporting is because of how good he is. If he's just some guy who's playing 10 or 15 minutes a night, or he's not an impactful player, then getting ejected doesn't matter, right? Or him getting benched is not a big deal, but he gets ejected and they lose. So I think that one of the things that we're seeing is that this is the product of him becoming a key force for the Lakers and if you want to say dominant, one of the more dominant players in the league. I wouldn't put him up there as one of, like top 5 player in the league or even top 10, but in terms of his position and the value of his position, his impact is right there. And you ask about his growth as a player, and I mean, really, the trajectory that he's been on has been kind of amazing, considering where he started 7 years ago as, a pudgy high school kid who hadn't really even completed one full season with his high school team. And so now you see him develop, and he's got a jump hook with both hands, and he's extremely and he's built up his body to be one of the stronger players in the league, and he's blessed with great height, but he's also got tremendous hands and strong footwork. And so he's really started to put all of these tools together to become extremely polished, and when you combine that with his power and his sheer size, then you see the types of results that he's getting. And as far as the maturity stuff goes, I think I'm not sure if it's overplayed per se. I just think that it's part of the package of a growing player who's coming into his own, who's trying to figure out what type of player he can be on the court and how he can impact the game, whether that means, kind of, in my opinion, foolishly firing up a three-pointer. That's neither here nor there to me, because, he's taking a three, and that's bad, but he's also now taking turnaround jumpers from 15 feet, and those are going in. And if you were to look at him a year ago, that wasn't a part of his arsenal at all. And so, I don't expect him to become a stretch 5. I'm not saying he's going to be Arvydas Sabonis out there, trailing big man firing up a three-pointer, but it's in a way it's good for him to see what he can and can't do. But I do prefer him closer to the basket, obviously.
I think you bring up a lot of great points right there, especially since the rest of the country can finally see what Laker fans have been talking about with Andrew Bynum for years and years. I think Laker fans kind of expected this kind of play a few years ago, and now that he's finally at this elite level at the center position, the rest of the country's like, okay, we see what this guy's all about. And I think you also bring up a fantastic point about the maturity issue. I mean, he's 24 years old. How many 24-year-olds make the correct decision every single time out, in their job or in their life or whatever? So you see it around the league. Anybody under 25 is going to have maturity issues, and you can go to any team around the league outside of Kevin Durant and pick that player and say, oh, he should have done this or that. So that's a great point. But I want to segue over to the head coach, because it's been a rocky season, to say the least, from players complaining that they want the triangle back to, we heard the bickerings before, and, even before they even got together, there was a whole Kobe and Mike Brown. Does Kobe like Mike Brown? Now that we're near the end of the season, Darius, kind of talk to us a little bit about Mike Brown's job. What would you grade him, and what do you expect going into the playoffs with him?
Well, I think that judging Brown is both really easy and quite difficult. It's difficult because he's following up Phil Jackson, and so he's trying to fill Shaq-size shoes, right? These things are clown shoes, essentially. They're size 50s or whatever, right?
Absolutely.
So he's following in the footsteps of the guy who's got the most championship rings ever, who essentially also worked the media like a pro, who had the skins on the wall so that if he was questioned, he could kind of give you a wry smile and then say something clever and shut you down. And Mike Brown has no such luxuries. So the way that he's judged is kind of like looking in a funhouse mirror. It gets distorted sometimes as to what type of job he really is doing based off of expectations that come from the previous era. So in that way, it's a bit difficult because he's actually been quite good in a lot of ways. There are things that I think a lot of Laker fans have been frustrated about, mostly surrounding, the minutes played of his key players, or how the rotations haven't necessarily been as clean as what people would like. People's substitutes or the reserves minutes have been jerked around some. He's tinkered with the starting lineups a lot, and so people kind of zero in on these things that he's not doing as well. But when you really look at the situation that he's found himself in and where the Lakers are positioned within the Western Conference, I'm not sure that you could really come back and say he's done a bad job. I actually think that he's been quite good, and that, the real bones will be made during the playoffs. So, the story is still a bit unwritten, but he's helped improve the defense. The offense has now kind of picked itself up, that now that he's found a more traditional point guard to run his schemes, and when you go back to the beginning, he had essentially a short training camp and no time to work with the players. And then the season starting, and now there's no practice time, but yet he's working with all of this on the fly, and yet the Lakers are, 16, 17 games over 500. They're third in the West, and they look like they are rounding into playoff form to be a contender for the championship. At this point, what could people really want more beyond that?
Darius, I agree with you, and it's funny because, I look back, I was not a very big fan of Cleveland Mike Brown. I thought always an excellent defensive coach. I thought he was quite a poor offensive coach. I saw him butcher more than one playoff series by not insisting his team play the right tempo, and I think he let LeBron walk over him. Laker Mike Brown's a very different guy, and it's interesting because when he was hired, didn't love the choice, kind of felt the Lakers skimp money-wise, could have gotten Adelman for an extra $1 million to $2 million a year, decided to go Brown, and because the way LeBron walked over from, I kind of felt like, well, geez, now he's got to coach Kobe and the Laker personalities, and if you got walked over in Cleveland, well, this is going to be pretty bad here. But Brown surprised me about a month ago. You know what? It takes some serious guts to bench Kobe. You know, to make sure to bind him as well as he's playing, to sit him down, and that whole substitute teacher effect has kind of gotten lost. And he has kind of put his own stamp on this team for what he wants them to be and what he can be. Talk a little bit about those benchings, Kobe and Bynum in the same week, and the opportunity he took. And have you seen differences in the team and his handling of the team? And if you have, what differences since he kind of, had his big moment of benching his two best players?
Well, the Kobe thing was interesting. He ended up bringing him back in, and at the time, I actually didn't think it was that big of a deal. I know it got blown up a lot, and that he sat him down, and it was kind of a crucial part of the game that the Lakers looked like they might make a run, and then they took him out, and then they did make a run, but they brought him back in, and then they lost. And so, the thing with benching Kobe is that regardless of how hard-headed people think Kobe is, or that he's not a very coachable player, Phil Jackson had that criticism with him after his first stint with the team before he came back. I think that for the most part, Kobe is a pretty smart guy, and that he's willing to work within the team structure, and I don't think it was that big of a deal per se. I'm sure that Kobe didn't like it, and he admitted as much, but I also think that within the context of how the team was playing in that specific game, not to mention the minutes that Kobe had played in that game, I think that if Kobe actually would have not sat down at that point, he would have played something like 42 minutes that game or something like that, or 43 minutes. He was set to have another high minute game that night. And so while the timing seemed odd and the circumstances definitely played into that storyline, I didn't think much of that one. The Bynum benching, though, I think actually showed that he does have some stones. That Bynum took this at the time, I thought it was a laughable shot. I mean, it was horrid, essentially, to me. And on Twitter, I called for him to go to the bench right at that moment and basically said I would not be surprised if Bynum did not come back in. And he played, I think, maybe another 2 minutes to start the fourth quarter and then got sat down again and then didn't play the rest of the game. And I think that from that, what we did learn is kind of what you said, is that, Brown's a pretty secure guy. He's got 4 years on this contract. He's relatively young, and so I think that he's basically showing, I am the coach of this team, and you're going to accept the things that I talk about, and if you don't, you're going to sit down. And we're a talented enough team to sit you down. Whether or not we win or not, I don't know. I think that sometimes you have to be willing to give up a game. Phil Jackson's done that. Greg Popovich has done that. I think Brown is viewed through a different prism from those guys because he doesn't have the championships to back it up. But I don't think it's really that big of a deal that he's going in that direction. And I also think that the guys are pretty coachable and are understanding that this is the team that we have and this is our head coach, and that they respect him. Earlier during the year, I think that the guys were probably still longing some for what was. But through the course of the season, they found out that, the triangle's not coming back, Phil Jackson's not coming back, Brian Shaw's coaching for Indiana. This is our guy. So let's go do it. And I think that's what we've seen.
I think you bring up some more fantastic points. I feel like I'm a broken record, keep saying that. But, just like players learn, coaches learn. And I think Mike Brown has learned dealing with a player like LeBron James, who, we all know the story with Delonte West in the video room where, Mike Brown's calling out everybody but LeBron. And I think that, his second chance as a head coach with the Lakers here, is allowing him to learn from some of the mistakes he might have had in Cleveland. You know, he probably regrets not pushing the buttons a little harder on LeBron, and you know, maybe they would have won a championship because they clearly were talented enough. So it's interesting to see how coaches adapt when they, you know, go to new opportunities and they get a chance, especially a young coach like Mike Brown, who's growing and learning and getting better every year, it seems. But I want to shift on to Ron Artest, who Matter World Peace, whatever you want to call him. I'm not comfortable with the Matter World Peace yet, but you know, he's been playing great ball during this stretch, and I kind of want to take your opinion. It's kind of an easy, short question, but do you see this little stretch without Kobe helping him get into his groove for the playoffs, or do you think he's getting into the groove because he's getting the kind of touches and the kind of reps that he needs?
Well, I think both. You know, I'm not sure if those are independent of each other. I think that he's definitely gotten more touches, and I think that that's helped him. But, you know, some recent things have come out that, you know, he's been pretty banged up the last year or so. He had an Achilles issue that he had said for a while was quite sore, you know, that and it wasn't keeping him out of games, but he did explain that that he definitely did not feel like he was as light on his feet and that he didn't have the same quickness. And he also had a back issue that was not reported on at all until recently, and that's healed up for him. And so, to me, if you put it within the context of maybe the nicks and bruises are gone and that he's worked himself into being in the type of shape that he's accustomed to being in during the NBA season, then some of this makes sense in terms of how he looks physically. You know, in terms of the shots going down and the type of offensive player that he's been, you know, whether or not you want to take him at his word, and I think that, you know, he is a I don't want to say by trade, but, you know, he's got a little bit of rapper in him, right? So I mean, so there's a little bit of braggadocio to him, right? So I mean, but he's talked about, you know, I could score this whole time. The fact is that my job with this team isn't to score, you know, and he'll go back and talk about in Sacramento I was this, and in Houston I was that, and in Indiana, you know, and he'll litter off how he's a 20-point-a-game guy, and he could get those 20 points any night if that's what he was asked to do, but that's not what he's been asked to do. And so, you know, whether or not that's kind of playing himself up a little bit or not, I think what we're seeing is that he can still score, that within Mike Brown's system he has a little bit more freedom to kind of go out and work on different spots on the floor. You know, he's diving into the post more, he's getting some wing isolations, and he's doing damage with those. And this goes back to the first question you asked me about how is the team going to integrate Kobe, and can these guys keep it up? Kobe said in an interview to ESPN on Friday, I think Rick Bucher asked him, you know, what are you going to tell Ron? You know, he needs to kind of get him to play the same way when you come back. And he said, I'm going to be in his ear and tell him this is the guy that we need. And, you know, don't defer, don't just stand there, do these same things, because he's proven that he's capable, you know, and Kobe and Bynum and Gasol are going to get a ton of offensive attention or defensive attention when they're on offense. And so a guy like Ron, who does have a multifaceted game, and he's an underrated passer, and he can create for his teammates just like he can create for himself, he needs to keep this up. He needs to have the mindset of, I'm going to be in attack mode on offense, the same way that he's in attack mode on defense. You know, he's one of the more aggressive defenders that you'll find, and if he could transfer that mentality to the offensive end, you know, I'm not expecting 18 points a game or whatever that he's been getting since Kobe's been out, but a double-digit scorer who's shooting in the mid-40s and mid on overall and high 30s on three-point shots, he can be that guy.
You know, I've always been a big Ron fan. First of all, I think he's a nice person. Okay, I think he gets a really bad rap for what happened on that awful night in 2004. where he made a mistake as a young guy, and I think that who Ron is very different than that. So I'll preface this question with that statement because I am a Ron fan, and when Ron says things like, I can still score 20 a game, look what I did in Sacramento and Indiana and Houston, I'm actually one of the few that believes him. I still think he could. With all that said, do you think Ron is a better fit on the Mike Brown Lakers than he was on the Phil Jackson Lakers?
I think offensively, yes. I think defensively his role hasn't really changed that much, but the triangle was a read and react team, or it's a read and react offense. And one of the things that, and I mean, I think that he'd admit this himself, that and Phil talked about this a lot when he was coaching Ron, which was Ron really wants plays. He wants plays that are called, and he wants to know where he's supposed to go within the context of the play that's called. But that's not what they were asking him to do. They were asking him to read what the defense was doing to the Lakers' offense and then act accordingly. And he just didn't do it. I don't know if it's because he couldn't or if it's because, he was still thinking out the actions, but he just wasn't quite there. And the result was that he'd sometimes get some post-up options, but most of the time he was standing in the corner. And he was a spot-up three-point shooter. And his game is much more diverse than that. And I think with Brown, especially when Kobe was out, was that he kind of took on some of those roles that Kobe was doing. He's on the post, they're running isolations for him. He was even running some screen and rolls with him being the ball handler. These are all things that Kobe does on a night-to-night basis, and he showed that he could kind of do some of those things. It's one of the reasons why the Barnes and Ron combo, with basically Barnes playing shooting guard, but with Ron being offensively the shooting guard, doing some of the things that Kobe does, it's why it worked. It's because Ron kind of filled in those gaps that Kobe would normally do. So is he a better player? I think on offense, yes. And I mean, I have to go back to it again. He looks healthier. I mean, I wouldn't want to go to work banged up every single day. And if that's what he really was, then it's showing now, because he doesn't look that way now. He looks a lot quicker.
He's the opposite of Jermaine O'Neal.
Yes.
Brian, I got playoff questions, so I know if you had a couple other, roster questions for Darius, you can hop in real quick.
Well, I actually had two more, and he answered one that I don't know if that's, which was about Barnes. I'm going to ask one more on the Lakers, and then we can move on from the Lakers for a little while. A lot of tumult before the season began with the aborted Chris Paul trade. And you look at how it was handled by the two principals in it on the Lakers' end. On one hand, you had Lamar Odom, who pretty much told them he was going to retire, so they traded him in the middle of the night. And Lamar, frankly, for whatever reason, didn't seem to recover at all from it this season. And then you have Pau Gasol, who obviously wants to stay in L.A. as a Laker. Not only was able to be as professional a guy as you'll ever see and bounce back this season, have a good year, and be just a true class guy in how he handled the fact that he had to come back to a team that traded him, but he had his name in rumors pretty much right up until the deadline. Talk a little bit about that contrast. And I'm a big Lamar guy, so I'm not looking to shovel dirt on him or criticize him. I know he's had a lot of personal issues that have gone on. So I'm not looking to go there necessarily. I more want to highlight just what an amazing job, an amazing class act Pau Gasol is and how he handled it. Talk a little bit about that and what you think that's meant to the success the Lakers have had this year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you're going to find a bigger Lamar Odom fan than me, so, I mean, I'm definitely not going to shovel a bunch of dirt on him. I think that before I get to Gasol, I'll just say that I think Lamar's an emotional guy.
Yep.
And I think that what he really needed was someone, whether it be a teammate reaching out to him or someone in his personal life or his agent or someone to kind of talk him down some, to get him to understand everything surrounding that deal, and that if he were to go back to the team, he would be accepted with open arms, and that they still had the opportunity to do something special. But that didn't happen, and he got moved on to Dallas, and I think once he was actually in another uniform, playing for a different team in a different city, he probably got, it seems to me, and I'm not in anyone's head, and I hate to project what other people are thinking or feeling, but I get the sense that it was the grass really isn't greener, for Lamar, and so I feel bad that that's how it worked out for him. But moving on to Gasol, just like you said, he just handled everything as such a professional and with such class. And the other thing is that he's adjusted his game to help himself fit best within the construct of this new Lakers team. And I just don't know if there's another player that you can point to that you can say, look at everything that he's done in order to not only show how valuable he is as a piece of a puzzle when you're building a team, but as a teammate, in terms of he could easily be the low post threat for this Lakers team. He may not do it the same way that Andrew Bynum does, but if you put Powell on the post for 60 possessions a game and run your offense through him and look for him to be the guy that's your low post threat, he'd be putting up fantastic numbers, maybe not in the same way that Bynum's doing, but I would bet that the results are the same, even if in practice the way he's going about it is not. But instead, he said, look, I'll be the guy that's at the elbow and we're shooting 15, 18, 20-foot jumpers to provide space for Andrew Bynum to do work on the post. I'll be the guy that you can pass the ball to up high, and now you're running all of your screen actions around me, and so that I can help get other people open and be the offensive initiator, so that guys like Kobe can lead the league in scoring, right? Or that Bynum can have a breakout year and average close to 20 points a game and make his first all-star game. Earlier during the season, I was making the comparison of Gasol to Lamar, in that Gasol has adjusted his game to help his teammates, but while still putting up fantastic numbers, but it seems that people appreciate him less. And to me, I just don't get that. He's such a good player, and he's such a good teammate, and he's crucial to the success of the Lakers. I was looking at some on-court and off-court statistics for Gasol during these last 7 games when Kobe's been out, and the Lakers are putting up an offensive efficiency of under 90 when he's off the court, and a defensive rating of almost 120. So, and those numbers are staggering. When he's on the court, the offense is near 112 points per 100 possessions, and he's essentially been one of the key players to the success during this stretch that Kobe's been out, but yet people are pointing to Bynum and people are pointing to Ron, and they've been playing great too, but it's taken, even our conversation now, it's taken a bunch of time for us to even get to Gasol, and I think that that's indicative of how people view him, that he's the expendable piece when I actually think that he's the glue.
Now we're going to shift gears here. I'm not going to ask you about the Laker first-round predictions and their lineups until we really break down the playoffs, but let's jump to the other team in the city of L.A., and I got one quick small question for you on your blog. Are you going to update the top where it says even the Clippers? Because I think they earned the right to get that removed this season. But going forward, that's something we could talk about. But the Clippers here are an interesting team because, they did land the Chris Paul, and, expectations went through the roof, which usually happens when you land a superstar. They got Blake Griffin there. Talk to us a little bit about what your expectations were before the season, and have they met them, exceeded them, or fallen short of those expectations, and why?
I think the Clippers have really played well. And, I mean, in terms of exceeding expectations, I think they're probably right in line with where I thought that they might be. I think before the season, people were talking about how they could potentially overtake the Lakers, and I was of the mind that they probably would not, but that it would be close, and essentially that's right where they are. I think that Paul's such a fantastic player. I really can't, praise the guy enough for everything that he does to make a team be excellent. Look at the Hornets this year, and obviously, they've been hurt bad with injuries, and obviously, losing a superstar player like Paul is damaging. But he took that Hornets team last year and he pushed the Lakers to 6 games, and it was mostly all on his shoulders. He makes your offense better. He makes your defense better, and I think that we've seen that with the Clippers. So I think that they're a real threat, going into the playoffs. They seem to be playing their best basketball right now. So, I think that they're one of the 3 or 4 teams that you're looking at from the West as, a real threat to advance to the Western Conference Finals, and if things break their way in terms of matchups, even to the Finals, although I think that that's going a bit far. But yeah, I think that they've been a great team. I think it's great for the city of Los Angeles as well. The Clippers do have a dedicated fan base. It's not the size of the Lakers, and LA is a Lakers town, but the Clippers are doing well for themselves, and I think that only helps the league. I think it only helps the city, and everyone loves a good rivalry, and I think the Lakers and Clippers are becoming that.
It's definitely an excellent rivalry. It certainly has gone in that direction, and you're right about CP3. I mean, you talk about a guy that has had does a great job for one organization, and then his trade in and of itself, takes one franchise and ascends it and knocks the other one into the depths, and it's like a version of what Tyson Chandler did with Dallas and the Knicks, kind of on steroids, because it's a lot more extreme. Let me ask you this question. Looking at the West, looking at the way the Spurs are built, the Thunder we know, the Lakers we've discussed, the Grizzlies, and even to a lesser extent the Mavericks and the Nuggets, do you think the Clippers are built well enough to have some success in the West playoffs this year?
Yes, they are. They've beaten Oklahoma City, I think, twice in the past few weeks. In terms of, I think that I'm going to answer your question by going on a tangent a bit. I think that the West is this year, probably more than most years that I can remember, is almost entirely dependent on matchups.
Yep.
That you look at a team like Oklahoma City, and I think that the Lakers match up quite poorly with them.
Yep.
And then you look at a team like Memphis, and I think that the Thunder match up poorly with a team like Memphis.
Yep.
And then you look at a team like the Clippers, and I think they've shown that they struggle with a team like the Clippers. Whereas you look at the Lakers, they might match up well with the Clippers or with the Spurs, but you could see them struggling with Memphis. And so there's this kind of round robin or musical chairs element to the Western Conference playoffs, especially in those top 5 seeds or so.
Absolutely.
That I think is really going to determine who comes out of the Western Conference. And that's why lately I've been writing some about seeding and positioning, and over the next few days, when we actually start to see if these seeds can be locked up and the positions can get locked up, we'll start to talk more about the actual matchups, because I honestly think, depending on how things break, that there are, maybe upwards of 5 teams that you could see advancing to the Western Conference Finals, and then from there, it's one more series win, and this team is in the finals, whoever it is, whether it's Memphis. I think Memphis, if they stay at 5 and the Clippers stay at 4, that they could beat the Clippers. And then if for some reason Oklahoma City stays at 1 and they match up with Oklahoma City in round 2, they could beat Oklahoma City.
Right.
And then suddenly you can see the 5 seed in the Western Conference Finals, just like that. And so I think the same thing is with the Clippers. If the Clippers, in that same scenario, if they were to get by Memphis and then they got to play Oklahoma City, I could see them beating Oklahoma City as well. But I have such a high regard for Oklahoma City, I could see them, taking out the Lakers. I could see them taking out the Spurs. So I think that the Western Conference playoffs are just going to be fantastic basketball to watch. And I haven't even mentioned Denver, who is quite dangerous, or Dallas, who,
only won the title last year, right?
Yeah, and they're a different team, but let them get hot. Let Dirk find the groove that he was in last season down the stretch or into the playoffs. And if Dirk becomes unguardable again and creates a bunch of space for guys like Terry to start hitting jumpers, or Marion to be diving off of the ball and be this versatile threat that can guard 2 or 3 positions on defense and take the load off of guys, then they're dangerous too. So it's just going to be fantastic to watch.
It certainly is. Just as a quick aside, I saw something out of Dallas the other night that I found interesting from a playoff standpoint. They played against Houston the other night, and Brandon Wright, who hasn't played a ton for them this year, guy's been hurt the large majority of his career, did a heck of a job protecting the rim and the paint, was a huge reason that Dallas beat Houston the other night. And you think to yourself, if they can actually replicate just a little bit of what they lost in Chandler, it becomes a tough out also.
Yeah, people forget that, even though they've fallen off in the past month or so, but their defense has consistently been in the top 10 in terms of defensive efficiency all season. So, they've done it in different ways without Chandler, but they have the ability to put the clamps on a team because they have versatile wing defenders, and then you add in Haywood, who can be a defensive presence, especially as a one-on-one post defender.
Absolutely.
And then you bring in Wright, and then you talk about Marion, and then even Mahinmi.
Correct.
Who, that's a lot of size. Those guys are pretty good athletes. They can cover ground. They're also well schooled in playing a tricky zone defense. And they've got fantastic coaching. So while they have not looked like a repeat champion, and they've gone through a bunch of changes, I'm not counting them out at all. They could be the first round opponent for the Lakers, and while the Lakers swept the season series, all it takes is some hot shooting and a couple of stops here or there, and it can change a series. Last year the Lakers played the Mavericks, and essentially the Lakers had 2 games in hand before Dallas got the stops they needed. They hit the key shots, and then suddenly it's 3-0, and that series is over. And that's how quickly things can change. And all it takes is a mini burst and some confidence, and then suddenly, boom, they're advancing. So, yeah, it's going to be great. It's going to be a great playoffs. I can't wait to see these matchups. It's going to be super exciting.
Now, you kind of stole all my questions here, Darius. You kind of leave me with so much to work with here. Your rant answered everything I had written down, but I do have one question coming from Peyton Wales, who writes to the website I run here, theprobasketballtalk.com. He's a Laker fan, but he actually has a question for the Clippers here, and he kind of wants to know, what we see with Blake Griffin today. Is this kind of what we're going to see going down the road? Is he, has he kind of maxed out his abilities? Obviously he can improve on little things here and there, but is this kind of the Blake Griffin we see going forward, or do you see him making that next giant leap up to, becoming an elite player at his position?
That's interesting because I think that he works hard, and I think he's very much capable of making that leap, but some of it's just going to depend on, can he improve at the foul line, and can he become a guy that's hitting, 40% of those long 2-pointers that guys are going to surrender to him, and can he refine his post game? Those are kind of big improvements to make when you're a player, but I think that he can do it. Remember, it's his it's his third season, but it's only really his second year of playing in the NBA. I think he's learning how he's going to be guarded. I think he's learning what the defense is going to be giving him. I think it'll only help him to have a guy like Chris Paul playing with him to kind of help school him, and I don't want to say being a professional player, but, just in terms of being in his ear each night and helping to motivate him. People talk about Kobe is having this killer instinct and all that, but, Chris Paul's a killer too, and having a guy like that on your team can only help you moving forward. If there's another leap for Griffin to make, I actually don't think it's this huge leap. I just think that he needs to find a little bit more consistency and needs to learn how to play more with a plan. Some players never develop that. They never develop how to attack a particular possession beyond what their athleticism allows them to do. And I think that that's really the leap in Griffin's game is harnessing the immense skill set that he already has, refining certain parts of his game, and then bringing it together to actually have a plan of attack on any given possession to how he can be kind of more of a go-to player. Does he have that in him? Time will tell, but he's definitely talented enough, and from what I've read and heard about him, he certainly has the work ethic. It just kind of depends on whether or not it does come together for him. So will he? If I knew that, I'd probably be a rich guy because I'd be able to predict a lot of stuff, right? But he's definitely one of the young up and coming players that really is very, very good.
Now, Darius, I look at the West playoff. One of the, I have a theory about the playoffs, and I feel like it's going to be more prevalent this year than any other year because of the compressed schedule that we're coming out of to go into the playoffs, which is that it's playoffs are a war of attrition. If you can get by in a particular round playing the minimum amount of games without having to subject your players to bigger minutes and more risk of injury and more fatigue, you're obviously better off. I think this year, considering the fact that it's going to be 66 games in 123 days when we finally end next week, that it's even more important. Like I look at the Mavericks last year, and I feel like one of the reasons they were able to win the title is because they took care of business against the Lakers, didn't let it go more than 4, took the Thunder in the Western Conference Finals in 5, didn't mess around and let things go to 6 and 7 and have to kind of play a lot of extra minutes they don't need to play. I feel like this year it's more important because of the compressed schedule, and I also think the West is deeper and tougher. Do you think, assuming my theory is correct, and you'll tell me if you think my theory is correct or not, but assuming you think my theory is correct, you think that's going to put the Western Conference teams in a tougher situation in an NBA final because it may end up being easier for whoever comes out of the East, probably Chicago or Miami, because they may not have the level of tough series having to go as deep as we're going to see in the West?
I think there's merit to your theory there. When you look at the Lakers runs back in 2009 and 2010, you see a couple of sweeps in there. You see a couple of in-5 game or series. They rarely got pushed to 7 games and rarely even got pushed to 6. And so there's definitely merit to what you're saying there. And I do think that in a compressed season that it is going to matter how your minutes are managed. I think that people always talk about depth and how, depth is for the regular season, but when the playoffs come, you're going to play 8 guys, and that's going to be that. And I do subscribe to that, but I think that this is a year where some depth actually would be nice, so that you don't have to trot out your key stars for 40 minutes a night or 42 minutes a night in order to kind of advance in a playoff series. I think that for a game or two that you definitely need, that's fine, but for 5 consecutive for 5 consecutive games or 6 games, racking up 200 plus minutes in a series, that I think that's going to wear on that's going to wear on certain guys, whether you're as old as Kobe Bryant or you're as young as Kevin Durant. I think that it's going to matter, especially in a physical Western Conference. People talk about these aren't the days of all the run and gun teams of, when the Lakers were getting bounced by the 7-second or less Suns, right, where these guys are all offense and no defense. Memphis will punish you.
Oh, yeah.
So, the Lakers will punish you. I mean, even though the Spurs aren't necessarily this elite defensive team anymore, I'm pretty sure that Duncan is going to protect the paint, that they're going to bring in Splitter, and he's going to do the same. And we already talked about the Mavs, and, I've seen Haywood give some blatantly hard fouls, and so guys start to attack the paint, and they're going to feel it. And so getting out of these series early, just like you said, I think that's going to be key. Whether or not that matters when it comes to the finals, I'm not sure, because I still think once you get past the first round in the East, I think if you're looking at a Final Four teams of potentially Chicago and Miami, and then you probably put Boston in that mix, and then whoever the fourth team is, maybe it's Indiana, those guys are going to be going to war too, and so I don't necessarily see any of these series being easy, especially when almost every team is flawed this year.
Yes, everybody's got warts. You're right.
Whether it's because of the compressed schedule or the lack of practice time, or guys just maybe not being at the top of their game for whatever reason. Every team has a couple of holes that could be exploited, and when you get to the playoffs and the cream rises, you're going to see guys, picking at those scabs and trying to dig in to where those weaknesses are and extend these series, especially from the second round and beyond in both conferences. And so, just like you said, it will be a war of attrition, but whether or not one conference will have an advantage, I'm not sure about that yet. I think that if you're Miami and you advance and you potentially have to play Chicago in the Eastern Conference Finals, or you maybe get Boston in the second round, which actually could happen if they actually overtake Chicago for the number 1 seed and Boston stays at 4, then they could play both Boston and Chicago to try to get to the finals. So, would you want that path? I'm not sure if I would. And I'm not sure how intact they'll be if they actually do manage to navigate that minefield. So, we'll see.
All right, Brian, I got one last question. It's the gun to your head question. So if you have any other specifics, you can throw them out there.
No, I'm good. You go ahead, Jacob.
Okay, since Brian's been asking this question to every single guest we've had on in the past couple of weeks, I thought I'd chime in with the same question.
I like it. I know where you're going.
Gun to your head, Darius. Who are the matchups in the Western Conference Finals and the Eastern Conference Finals? Who is meeting in the finals and who's winning it today? Gun to your head.
Oh, man.
Oh, we don't make it easy at the end, Darius.
Yeah, no. So, okay. So some of this is going to come down to what the seedings are, right? Because, like I said, the matchups matter. But
we're not going to fry you if you're completely wrong. But if you're right, we'll take a little credit.
No, sure.
Only upside with us, Darius.
So for the Western Conference Finals, let's say it's going to be the Lakers and the Spurs. And I've got the Lakers advancing. And in the Eastern Conference, I'll have Chicago and Miami, and I've got Miami advancing. And in the finals, geez. Laker fans would kill me if I actually picked against the Lakers here. So you know what? I'm gonna go back and make sure I'm not grilled, and I'm gonna say the Lakers win in 6 games.
If it was that finals, as a Celtics fan, just so you know, I was born and raised in the Boston area, I would root for the Lakers in that finals, just so you know.
Yes, and that will be a David Stern special, that final, by the way.
he'll be diving through his money bin like Scrooge McDuck.
Exactly.
He'll be doing the backstroke with gold coins kicking up in the air.
Exactly. Darius, good stuff. Thanks so much for giving us so much time today. You were an outstanding guest, getting the nuts and bolts of this stuff. And we definitely, come playoff time and even into the off season, we want to have you back, talk about what the Lakers are going to do in the off season and some other stuff around the league. You were as good as you were in the Lakers today. You were just as good in the stuff around the league, and we're looking forward to getting you back on another time.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, you.
Darius.
Darius Soriano, forumblueandgold.com. Follow him on Twitter at forumbluegold. No one does the Lakers better. No one tweets better during Laker games. Man knows his Lakers inside and out, as you just heard.
And, Brian, you and I always try to get, the other side of the sea, because we're over here on the East Coast, and it's always nice and refreshing to get those guys. And know what I look forward to? I don't look forward to their Laker opinions as much. I look forward to their East Coast opinions, because you always want to step out of your shell and look at it, objectively, as our boy Mo Hamilton likes to say, look at it objectively and not have a biased opinion on something. And it's always great to get those opinions from those guys.
It is. I will say this, and Jacob, you and I have our off-air conversations about, kind of ways to make our show better. And one of the things, and I'll say this on air right now, because I think it's something that we've learned, and we had Tommy D and Mo Hamilton on, who were Knicks guys, a week and a half ago, and we were enamored. Not only the Knicks stuff was great, but the around the league stuff was compelling conversation. I thought Darius the same thing right here. Yeah, he was great on the Lakers. We expected him to be great on the Lakers, but his stuff on the Clippers and talking about the West and the matchups and having his finger on that stuff, I thought it was outstanding. And it's going forward in the future, that's stuff we certainly want to ask some of these guys a little more about.
Absolutely, and he said the magic word that you and I have been talking for quite some time now. Memphis. Memphis is that magic word that every Western Conference team does not want to say. They don't want to say it. They don't want to see it. They want nothing to do with Memphis. And it's nice to see that every other, NBA writer is on board. We all see this, and it's kind of crazy that the fans aren't seeing it just as yet. But all the experts out there, they're looking at that, and they're shaking in their boots, so to speak.
Yeah, and NBA Unplugged was on it first. Memphis is the NBA Unplugged special, my man, our favorite.
Absolutely, and he gave you a little nugget, too, about your Nuggets.
He did. You know me with my Nuggets, so he gave me a little shout-out there about how dangerous they are, because I've been on that.
Absolutely, and so we do have our show on Tuesday locked in. We have at least one guest locked in. We might be having two guests on. I don't want to say the name yet because he's not confirmed, but we will have Taz from the Basketball Jones joining us on Tuesday, and that will be a 4 o'clock show. That's
going to be a lot of fun, Taz Mellis. I'm looking forward to that. And Jacob, thank you. This has been great today. Nice Friday special. I think it worked out well.
Absolutely. Hey, going forward, we might have a day-to-day show with, if we keep getting all these guests lining up. And it's funny, we're so honored to have them on, and every once in a while they'll throw a humble pie right in our face and say, you know what, you guys are the great guys having us on this. So, we keep growing and growing. That's all what it's about.
It's all good, Jacob. You enjoy the weekend, my friend.
You too. Take care. That's Brian Geltzeiler from the HoopsCritic.com. I'm Jacob Noble from TheProBasketballTalk.com. This was NBA Unplugged. We'd like to thank our guest, Darius Soriano from Forum Blue and Gold, and everybody enjoy your weekend.
My trying to speak to the kid in Spanish, kid, like que tu quieres. I'm like, where is the bathroom? I hella gotta piss. Where's the bathroom? Ask whom the bell tolls for. Hey yo, where you get this place from? The Hellhole store? Yo, I'm in the building with Belding. Ask for whom the bell rings. DR.